Hello, everyone, and welcome back to the Board Gaming Doctor. My name is Phil, and I'll be your Board Game Doctor today. After a brief hiatus, I am back with another review, and pardon if my voice sounds a little raspy. That's part of the reason why it's taken so long, is because I'm recovering from a sickness. So today I wanted to talk about Mistborn, the deck building game. This is the new John DeClaire game that was released this year. I believe they are sold out at the moment, but have some more copies planned in the new year. This is a game by Brother Wise Games as well. If you are familiar with their work recently, they're also they've funded and are producing the Stormlight, or I should say Cosmere RPG game, which was a lot of fun. I've had the chance to play that too, and it was great. But this is a strictly mechanically a deck building game in the universe of Mistborn, which is one of the Cosmere books made by Brandon Sanderson. I am a huge fan. I've reread these books as well as all of his other Cosmere and non-Cosmere related books multiple times. And so I do have the background of those books in mind, but you do not need to have them to play this game just to kind of get into it. This is a pure deck building game, and I want to start with some game comparisons. First of all, the mechanisms that are utilized in this game feel very similar to other deck building games that are more competitive in nature in terms of fighting different opponents, which are other players, or perhaps even a boss that you're trying to find. So it's very similar in the fashion of Star Realms as well as Aeon's End if you're looking for that more cooperative boss battling experience. There are other games, Shards of Infinity, that kind of fall under this category, but I would say that this is kind of a very similar offshoot mechanically towards those two games that I've played. And so let's get into past the comparisons, what makes this game feel unique. And I believe that most of it is from the thematic integration and application of the Mistborn book. And I should say that this is mostly based off of the first book in the series, The Final Empire, rather than all of the books that are combined. There are 7 total in this universe, and so the application of how those, the system, the magic system works in that book, is somewhat represented here with the metals that you get to burn, and these essentially are the units of energy that will power the cards that you play. You do have a market of cards and the ability to use money to buy these cards, and then so that is very reminiscent of a regular deck builder. But in order to power these cards, you utilize these metals. And so, for example, this pewter arm ally requires pewter to activate. And so on my turn, I would place this pewter token on top of it, saying that I have burned this pewter to use this card's effect. Some cards could require you to use 2 metals to burn, and so you can use your 1 metal token to burn steel to activate this coin shot, but you could also use another card and tip it sideways to reveal the extra flask of metal that you have here to utilize this card. And so there are many ways to be able to activate this card. For example, you also have Atium, which is the god metal represented in this game from the books. It essentially acts as a wild resource that you can also use to activate any cards as necessary. You can also flare these metals, and so, for example, if I didn't have a card in hand to activate this coin shot, I would burn or flare a metal rather, and I would flip it over to its flared side to use as that wild type resource to activate that card. And you can discard cards from your hand to obtain that metal again to burn. Other features of this game is that you have a track on your personal board that you automatically advance every turn, which allows you to burn and utilize more metals and different metals each turn, as well as activate your own character's abilities. And in this game, I was Kelsier. I, at first, would be able to use combat points or accumulate combat points if I had burned steel, at any point, but then you get to activate further abilities, especially if you are able to use ATM. In this game, you are either competitively fighting against other opponents who have other character cards, such as Vin here and Shan as well. The other character is Marsh from the books, which I don't see here. You also get to advance on missions. There are a collection of missions that you randomly choose 3 of, and they are essentially tracks that you progress up to gain various effects as you go up the track and as you reach certain tiers first. And then finally, you can play this game cooperatively or solo against the Lord Ruler. And the Lord Ruler has a deck of cards that you flip over every other turn, which has allies of his that you will fight against, or let's see if I can draw one here, an Edict card, which asserts his dominance further, and it allows for a ramping up of the negative effects that would either do damage to you or to lose your own allies, burn metals, flare metals, etc. And so the Lord Ruler has a certain HP limit too that you're trying to bring down, very similar to a boss in Aeon's End. So that's the basic overview of how this game plays. So into my review, I've gone over game comparisons as well, and to kind of go into the nuances of this game, what makes it stand out compared to others. First, when I did a peer review, a lot of people mentioned, and this peer review comes from comments that are on Board Game Geek for those who have played and or obtained this game already. The ability that I wanted to point out too that makes this game feel different compared to other deck building games, because I feel like everything that I've said so far, perhaps other than the metal system of using how to power your cards essentially, there are a couple of things that really stood out that make this game unique. One is the second player ability that everyone has, which says when you buy a card, you may resolve its top effect immediately, then eliminate it. So that gives you the opportunity to, from the market of cards, use the top ability of any one of these cards and then immediately eliminate it from the game. You don't have to bring it into your deck or your discard pile and then shuffle it into your deck and make it thicker, decreasing the chance that you would have to use it again. So especially if it's a card that you would only want to use once, perhaps, that fits the need, the immediate need that you have in the game, then you have that option, if you've progressed far enough into the game, to be able to do a one-time effect use of one of these cards. And you can eliminate it, and it potentially would eliminate it from someone else's opportunity to buy it for their own deck. And so a lot of potential for interaction there, and a lot of potential to keep your deck thin. There are other traditional ways that you can do so via card effects and whatnot to be able to eliminate cards from your own deck. And there are also ways to obtain cards from the eliminated pile. And so nothing truly feels out of the game. There are ways to be able to get to the cards that you want to use and buy. And even the fact that typically you would discard all the cards in your hand, and if you have leftover money, for example, which are found mostly on these funding cards, but on others as well, then you would just essentially eliminate the opportunity to save money. But in this game, you can purchase boxings, which do come at a price of 2 funding cards to 1 boxing. But if there aren't any cards that are available in the market that you'd want to use, you can trade in those funding cards for boxings to use at a future time to buy a card that is more expensive or just fits the situation more correctly. And so I thought that was really neat as well. There are some other criticisms that people have mentioned in the peer review. Some of those include the combat system. While interesting, in a 3 to 4 player game, you use this target symbol. It starts with the last player in turn order. But if another game comparison is allowed, you would think of this similar to King of Tokyo, where the person who is targeted after combat resolves with targeted allies, the player will receive the rest of the combat, and then afterwards they get to choose who this target will be. and that could be anyone. And so there is agency to who will receive damage next in terms of where this target is assigned, and not necessarily everyone ganging up on a character. There is some alleviation from that, where many people might bully a certain character if they are running rampant with their deck building. So I thought that was an interesting way to do so. However, for some people, despite the interesting way to target people with combat, this game did feel a little long for what it is at 3 to 4 players. It seems to be best played at 2 when you, once again, a direct comparison to games like Star Realms, where the amount of interaction and game length feels right and appropriate at a shorter time interval. That's not to say perhaps what it might feel like to do a cooperative game against the Lord Ruler, but in any case, that is what some people say. Otherwise, people have felt like the game is very approachable and easy to learn, very familiar because of its mechanisms. And anyway, so that's what people think. Now, to go into my first impressions, I'm going to do things a little bit differently. I do have a criteria where I have set up 10 different aspects of a game that I find the most meaningful and interesting to me. And so I'm going to go down those lists and assign each of those categories and a score out of 1 through 10, and then add those up, and that's my overall rating and score. So for learning, how easy is this game to learn and play? I give it an 8 out of 10. It's very straightforward to learn. I think it's very approachable for those who are gamers and familiar with deck building, but also to non-gamers. You can use the theme to kind of get into what is going on, to explain how things work. And so I do appreciate that, and I think it's fairly easy to jump into, regardless of who you are. There were a couple of things, especially with the medal system, I had to relearn a couple of times or reread just to make sure I was doing that correctly. With A-Team as well, and rules for solo play, but it only took a couple of rereads to fully understand the rules. Strategic expression. So this is how I feel like each game can feel strategically different, where you can pursue different avenues of play. And I give it an 8 out of 10. I think flexibility was definitely a forefront in how this game was created and played. There isn't one direct way to win in this game. There are two. You can either deplete the health of your opponents or the Lord Ruler if it's cooperative or solo, or you can achieve all 3 of these missions and advance on the track of all 3 of these, and you can win in that way. To do so, you can focus on cards, which thematically are very similar to how it is depicted in the book. For example, Iron and Steel, a lot of them have to do with combat. Tin as well can do that in Pewter. But then you have more of the subtle metals that manipulate emotions and things like that, and like Bronze and Copper. And so those cards tend to help you advance on missions. And so there are a mix and match of things that you can do to win at this game. And the way that you build your deck as well, I feel, can really help out a certain strategy or not. For example, if you do want to have a bigger deck and a wider variety of metals that you can activate on each turn, your training can allow for that to happen. Or if you want to focus on 1 or 2 metals and really push on a certain victory condition, that is feasible as well. You can have a thin deck, you can have a big deck. It really allows for flexibility, and once again, the additional ability to be able to use these cards as a one-time effect rather than forcing them into your deck and then having to eliminate them later, I think is really interesting and fun. And that kind of goes into the mechanism uniqueness and execution. I give it an 8 as well, mostly for the ability to use these effects as a one-time deal. I think that just allows for a lot of mechanical flexibility in this game. Now, thematic integration is going to be a 9 out of 10. It just misses that 1 point. It's just shy because of the mechanism of flaring. Now, in the book, I don't feel like you can flare tin, for example, and utilize a steel push or an iron pull, for example. In this game, you can. And so mechanically, this really helps with the flexibility to flare metals and burn them to help out another card when you are short. But in my mind, when I first had read this, and this kind of goes to the learning, like I thought, oh, if a card required 2 iron to use, and if I didn't have another card that had iron or steel depicted on it as a potential backup energy to use, essentially, I could use the steel to activate this and then flare it to activate it as 2. In my mind, that thematically made more sense to do. I don't know if that, gameplay wise, made much sense when it was in development, but that was the one hiccup that I had with the thematic integration. Otherwise, the card and the art, were fantastic, and I think everything is depicted really well. Everything is good there. The rules and the way that the game plays not only abstractly makes sense with the theme of the game, but I love that you can still play this game and follow the general sense and story of the first book, The Final Empire, where you are trying to bring down, like Ocean 11 style, the Lord Ruler as a group of ragtag allies. And so I think that was really interesting, but it also, the competitive mode, I feel like represents the different factions of Scadrial that you're fighting against each other with your own Mistborns, etc. And so I think it fits that bill and portrays the book in a very meaningful way. So very high score for that. And then my scores start to drop off a little bit with variability. I feel like the variability in this game is a 6 out of 10 for me. And the same goes with replayability, a 6 out of 10, because I feel like while the deck is pretty big, you still get to see a lot of these cards even after a few plays, and so it's really easy to be very familiar with these cards. And so if you're always looking for something new, a new card or new card combinations to pop up, the probability of that happening becomes less and less the more you play this game, and that limit for me comes a lot quicker because you do get to cycle through a lot of these cards. And so for me, the visual aspect of variability is limited. The base game only comes with 4 of these characters, the ones that I've mentioned before. And so there aren't, and here's Marsh. If you're looking for character variability, it doesn't have the same options that you would see in a game like Aeon's End, albeit there are many expansions towards that as well. But I feel like even in the base game, in comparison, there are a lot more options to fight against with different characters, but also against different bosses. And in this one, it's just the same Lord Ruler that you're fighting against. And so for me, the solo game, I've played this solo and have learned how to beat it. And I mean, I don't feel any desire to come back and play it again. I don't feel like the differences between each character make it drastically different for me to feel like it would be different as well. And so I don't think this game for me in the solo perspective would be very replayable in the long run. I think it would be fun to pull out with other fans of Mistborn who want to play it cooperatively against the Lord Ruler, or to play it competitively as well, every once in a while. I think that's where it will come, and fortunately it is an easier game to get into, and perhaps there are some opportunities for expansion if we do want to explore the rest of the original Mistborn trilogy, as well as the future Mistborn books that are depicted in Wax and Wane, etc. If you know. But so there probably will be good expansion material. I think there's a good foundation here, but in and of itself, I would love for that expansion material to be here to increase that replayability and exploration. The solo, I guess, kind of dovetails with that thought. It's a 5 out of 10 for me. While it does thematically feel very similar to how I felt reading the book, it's fun for 1 or 2 plays, but it doesn't really hold up to the amount of options and flexibility that you would want for an engaging solo experience for multiple plays. Player interaction, I give an 8 out of 10. I think some people felt like this game wasn't very interactive enough. I mean, you are directly attacking other folks and their allies and their own characters as well, and so I do feel like there's plenty of interaction there, targeting others with the unique targeting system that is in place here. Purchasing cards, of course, there is the interaction of grabbing these cards first before someone else does, as well as progressing up these tracks, trying to get to certain spots first before anyone else does. And so to me, there is plenty of good interaction that could lead to you really paying attention to other people's boards and what they're trying to accomplish. And then finally, competitiveness. How meta relevant or tournament worthy would this game be is what I'm trying to get at. And I think this game is quite, but has quite a good potential for it. I give it a 7 out of 10. I feel like the deck is large, but short or thick or thin enough, I should say, to be able to really understand these cards, understand the game state based off what is offered, the missions that are available, and the characters that everyone is playing. A lot of people compare this to Dune Imperium, but without the worker placement, and I think the flexibility and the interesting cards that you have in this game make it interesting enough that you can really pursue different avenues of strategy to therefore make things more transparent when you are playing competitively. And so I think it does have that potential. One thing that I did want to mention too, and I think it's in my discard pile, there is a card, it's called the Confrontation, it might be in my deck, that is really interesting. It is right here. And so it's a third win condition that is only on this card. If you play this card with 3 ATM, you automatically win the game. And so I love the aspect of trying to chase this third win objective as well. Similar to the opportunities that you're given in games like Seven Wonders Duel and a lot of the Duel games that have been made after that. And so, really cool ways to pursue strategy. And so therefore, I feel like this game is quite competitive. So overall, I give it a 7.2 out of 10. I really enjoy this game. Right now, in terms of replayability, I think it has some issues for me, but in and of itself, the game is excellently developed mechanically, but also thematically. And I think anyone who really enjoys the Mistborn series and gaming would enjoy at least playing this game and reliving the first book story through the mechanisms of this deck builder. So I applaud everyone who is behind the development of this game, and I think they did a great job. So those are my first impressions of Mistborn, the deck building game by John DeClaire. Thank you. Let me know if you have any thoughts, if you've played this game already, and I'd love to hear that. So thank you for listening or watching this video. Hope you schedule an appointment with me in the future as your board gaming doctor, and I'll catch you on the next one. Take care.